For me, a major element of how can a coach help is to help you feel confident that you're actually executing the workout correctly. Even if you like the plan that is in a book and it happens to be great for you, it's hard to always remember what marathon pace feels like, particularly as you age. And so having somebody that you can say, this is how I'm feeling after each workout, you have then somebody that can help you navigate that.
I'm trying to help the person develop into the runner and athlete that they want to be, and whatever that means. And I feel like my biggest utility is reassuring them when they're feeling insecure about a workout or nervous because the workout sounds hard, and trying to kind of give people the confidence to give themselves a shot at it. So we're in a new space.
We are in a new space. What do you think about it?
I like it.
We have lighting.
Warmer than I thought it was. I mean, aesthetically warmer than I thought it was going to be. So I'm happy about that.
There's not a lot on the walls yet, but we will get there.
Yeah.
For anybody watching on YouTube or Spotify, this is the event room of the new Bakline space. And we're super excited. And it's also going to be where we do our podcasting from going forward, generally. Unless it's truly remote. Why we think.
We could have echo issues.
We're
going to find out.
We are going to find out. We're hoping that all goes to plan. But being in a new space brings new possibilities, and I'm excited about it.
Me too.
So we hope that for those watching, this is a more aesthetically pleasing thing to watch than the previous couple episodes where we were both in our respective apartments.
But there will be no Eliza appearances.
There will be no Eliza appearances, so there won't be any like random purrs coming into the microphone. That's okay. We do want to bring her maybe one day. I think that it's possible. I don't think there's anything that she could really get into trouble with. Maybe the pain. I think she would sniff it. Everything would get sniffed.
Yes. Well, that's how she explores.
Yes. Who was your first coach?
So it would have been my junior high track coach. Which was when I formally started running on a team. We did have elementary track, but that was just kind of you did a race, and if you were good enough, then you got onto the team, and there was one meet. Yeah. So we didn't really have a coach. But in junior high, we had proper coaching, which I think made me okay with being like an independent runner later on. But I do wonder if I would and could have been better with somebody steering the ship a little bit more.
Especially in the early years of high school and navigating.
Yeah. I mean, this started
changes in your body.
13 and 14.
Yeah.
So even the older girls were 15, maybe. He was also my geography teacher.
I feel like coaches in high school often have that dual hat.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a super competitive high school, private school situation. Yeah. 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 I had a similar experience. The first proper coach that I had was Mr. Rober. And I'm pretty sure he was a Jack Daniels, Lydiard style guy, higher volume. And I remember my mom saying something to the effect of like, oh, he runs all of his runners into the ground. And I think he had a lot of the right things. He had a lot of the right ingredients for being a coach. I think he was, he wasn't a geography teacher, but he was a U.S. history teacher. And I think it's possible that he cared way more about the athletic coaching than he did the teaching. I think he genuinely cared about high school athletes. I just think that to succeed in those types of training plans requires a lot of dedication. And I think it's sometimes tough to have that when you're in high school and you're figuring out lots of stuff. Yeah. My other track coach, because Mr. Roper was a distance coach, and my other track coach, he said something to me that kind of stuck with me for pretty much all of my life and was a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, as you know. And that was that you're a jack of all trades and a master of none. And that was like hard to hear as a kid, because what I heard was you're a master of nothing. And you know, Jack is close to Joker. And so you're like, what am I doing here? And I think today I do take a little bit more of the better part of what I think he meant, which was that like, I'm good at a lot of stuff.
I think you're a very athletic runner. and not all runners are athletes in the sense of eye-hand coordination or being able to master a range of skills. Like a lot of people end up running because they can't catch ball or, that's kind of the classic. Whereas I think that's perhaps why you thrived in a lot of different events, is that you are more adaptable and a more natural athlete in that sense.
Yeah. So it primed me for the decathlon, and that was kind of like what I eventually found to be my calling, despite not being able to complete a single decathlon, so I cannot call myself a decathlete because of an injury that occurred. But I did feel like towards the end of my high school career, that I was starting to get the right coaching. But all this to say that a coach matters, and how they talk to you matters, and what it is that they say and how it is that they get the best out of you matters. I think a lot of us are used to managers in our professional lives or teachers. And because that's a more common relationship, we're able to understand what it is that we like in a good teacher or in a good manager. So today's episode is all about understanding and being more thoughtful about what it means to have a coach, the why you would find a coach, and how we would find a coach. So we will cover a ton of topics during this episode, starting with why and when somebody might hire a coach or not, how a coach can help you, right? So what are the things that a coach can actually do realistically? Sometimes we expect potentially too much of coaches, or sometimes coaches offer things that perhaps they can't actually do. And so hopefully that section will talk a bit about setting expectations about what a coach can help you with and what they might not be able to. Knowing what you want out of coaching. If you as an athlete don't know what you want and what it is that you need and what your goals are, it's going to be hard to find then the right person, because similar to any relationship, you need to have a match of the athlete and the coach. Not every coach is going to work for every athlete and vice versa. We will then go into how to be coachable, to be honest with yourself and to have open communication with your coach, trusting your coach and asking that they also trust you, and how to really develop that relationship. We'll also talk about red flags and the things that if we saw, we would be a little bit concerned about in a coach and how they operated. And then closing it out with whether those red flags then turn into something that means that you should probably leave that coach, or when red flags aside, it's just ready to take a break. So getting into the first section, why do runners hire coaches and when are we ready? Now, we are coaches. We have a lot of people who reach out to us. We are also people who have reached out to others. So I know we have different experiences here, but from your perspective, what are the things that when somebody's looking to hire a coach, what are the main reasons that people come to us or have come to you privately asking for coaching?
I think the biggest one is probably the most obvious, which is they want to get faster. They want to improve in some way. Another common answer to what prompts people to reach out, especially if it's strictly improving performance, is they have a big race goal. Maybe it's a first marathon, or they're trying to BQ, or something has prompted wanting to maybe pivot their training.
Which I think both of these that you just talked about are like performance related, right?
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of times the initial perspective is something specific to performance. And that is certainly common. But I think as we get into this discussion, we're going to hopefully share that there are a number of other reasons why you might want to hire one.
Yeah. So then, and I think more broadly then, if it's not somebody that's coming in with a particular goal or PR or BQ in mind, they're either trying to go up in distance and they want some guidance in that. People that maybe ran before, took a break, want to come back and not get hurt, I think is a pretty common one that we see. So they kind of know what they're doing and they know themselves well enough to know that they might rush things, and they're looking for somebody to kind of guide and put up some guardrails.
Right. So structure. And not necessarily tied to a specific time goal, but I think this is a category of I'd like some structure. I'm not sure exactly what structure I should be adding.
Yeah.
Or I don't want to think about it, right? I think in our intake form, and we've asked a number of athletes, and be curious to actually see like at least the people who have filled out our own form, like what's the breakdown? We should do that afterwards.
I think a lot of people say, I don't want to think about it.
Right. Yes, I think that's true. And I think that their running part they want to do.
They want to put the energy there and not into overthinking.
Right.
Am I doing the right workouts?
Right.
And I think that is an important reason to think about a coach is it's really hard to be objective if you're writing your own plan and then having to decide, is this pace too fast? Is it too tired? Yeah. Should I push through this?
Is it too much?
Yeah.
Because my first non-high school coaching was part of a charity team. And so it was like, I kind of fell into there being a coach. Honestly, if the team did not have a coach, I probably just would have figured it out.
Yeah.
I probably saw it as a benefit. I know I definitely saw it as a benefit at the time. And I definitely got some specificity applied to the workouts that I was getting from my coach at the time as compared to like the rest of the group training, which I'm thankful for. But offloading the thought process also means that like, yeah, you don't need to worry about whether you are giving yourself too much or too little. You're outsourcing that decision-making to a different person to make.
Yeah. And it's probably a little easier to trust that, I think.
Yeah.
And not second guess yourself. And I think your experience is probably common to many people, whether it's a charity team or you're running with a club that has some kind of leadership structure and you're operating within a group plan.
Yeah.
You know, that is kind of coaching light for a lot of people and probably their first.
Yeah.
For many people that didn't run in high school or college, that might be their first sort of coach exposure.
I think that kind of transitions nicely into something that I have felt and many runners feel, which is I've reached a plateau. And when we are starting with either a group training plan or we are self-coaching, there's a lot of initial gains and that's fun. And I would say most runners getting into it, especially if they're quote unquote, you know, less trained or untrained in the grand scheme of things, you know, they've only been running a handful of years. That's not long in the,
or they're coming from another sport.
Right. So they're athletic, but like specificity of like doing this sport, especially if you're increasing your effort and mileage and pace over time, you're going to see those gains pretty early on. But at some point, you're going to reach a plateau. And so I think that's the next reason why somebody would say, I don't really know what to do next. Maybe they've heard like, add some miles, add some strides, add some hills. And then at some point, you're going to need something more structured, or you're going to need somebody to think about what adaptations will this person benefit from, not just hills and strides, which is a phenomenal, I think, training plan for most people. But at some point, you're going to need somebody to help you think through what are the next stages.
I think accountability is a very common one that we hear. It's one that I'm kind of on the fence on, honestly. As a coach, I am far more interested in helping somebody progress, whether that's in performance or in enjoyment or whatever goal they have, than being somebody's babysitter. I understand the thought process of I'm going to put some skin in the game and get somebody on my team that's going to help me and that's going to help me be more compliant with a schedule.
Yep.
I do think if you're sort of lacking that motivation on your own, just paying somebody is not going to change that. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, having a coach is not going to make you enjoy it more necessarily. A good coach might be able to kind of unwind what it is that you're not enjoying and help with that. But again, I think if you're not sort of intrinsically motivated for these goals, just signing up for a coach is not going to change that.
It's kind of like that SNL skit of the Italian, Adam Sandler, right?
Yeah.
He's like,
if you're sad at home,
if you're sad at home, you will still be sad in Sorrento. I can take you on a hike. That doesn't mean you're going to like hiking. So you need to have some intrinsic motivation. I think it's okay, provided that is not the sole thing. I think there are other ways to like have you accountable, but I don't think that's the best use of a coach and what it is that they can offer. We're going to talk about what a coach can do in a couple of sections from now. But I agree with you that if your sole or primary purpose for hiring a coach is that you just need some accountability, you're going to pay money for somebody to babysit you. And maybe that's slightly pejorative, but there should be other things that you're looking for. It's okay for accountability to be a component of the equation. We would just caution of getting a coach solely for that purpose might not be the right path. And then finally, and this is also one that I think perhaps one that we struggle with a little bit is, well, serious people have coaches. And so this is just the thing that you do.
I want to be seen as serious.
I want to be seen as serious. And so I'm going to get a coach because then that will set me apart from, others who are just doing their thing. Is there some correlation between having a coach and the seriousness with which you apply to your training? Yes, but I think the way I just phrased that is more of an intrinsic, I respect the thing that I'm doing and I therefore want to take it seriously. But I think if it's extrinsic for other people to see you as serious, I think that's probably also not the best use of a coach's resources or your own resources.
Time and money.
Yeah. Because I think that comes from a place of like worrying about how others are perceiving you. And I think the other things that we talked about, not that we're trying to judge here on why one might get a coach, we're just saying that most people are in their own space and they're probably not caring a whole lot about the fact whether you do or don't have a coach. So do it for you is I think the message on that. So that transitions us nicely into what prevents runners from hiring a coach. And when I think of not only myself historically, but athletes that have joined us and then perhaps took a break, or they say to us, yeah, I want to work with you guys again, and then like, it's one of these things, right? Yeah. So one of the most common ones is you're not fast enough. I'm not fast enough or ready to like be worthy of coaching. Yeah. And that is something that we hope to dispel with this episode. All of these other reasons why like hiring a coach would be useful is relevant, then your speed should not play a role. Now, I think that comes into another component, which is cost. And you might say to yourself, okay, well, if I'm going to pay for somebody, then I don't want to spend a month or 2 months paying them to help me get up to a place where I'm able to do workouts. Because maybe we would do a month or two of base just because I'm coming back from injury. I do understand that, but I also think sometimes we tend to overdo it. And I think when we think of how can a coach help, yes, maybe they're giving you a lot of easy miles to help with that transition back into running. But if you're only thinking about a coach solely through the lens of they're giving me something on a piece of paper or app or whatever, then you're not thinking about a number of other ways in which a coach can truly be of help, which is helping you navigate coming back. And so if it's solely about the workouts, there's a good coach can do a whole lot more than that. And so I think it's going to come down, we're going to talk about this in a bit, but it's going to come down to, I think, what are your goals? What are you looking to get out of it? And I think if part of your goal is not just thinking about it in the like, well, I know I just need to do some base miles coming back, but a coach can also help you with navigating that on the return.
You and I have on a number of occasions kind of not charge somebody knowing they're going to start up a cycle in a month or 6 weeks. And we kind of give them coaching light for that period where it's just kind of like, okay, try to get to 30 miles a week this week and 4 workouts or, So I think, again, if you have a good coach, they will be willing to kind of work with you and certainly I think if cost is an issue, most coaches will also work with you.
Yeah. The third thing we had on our list was about if you run with a club and you want to do the club workouts, or it's important that you do the workouts with your friends. And therefore, if you had a coach and you don't feel particularly pressed for one of the other reasons that we just talked about of why you might want one in terms of like a qualitative goal or a quantitative goal, then the social aspect of running with your friends outweighs, whatever it is that you might be looking for getting in a coach.
I think also people that came from like high school or college and are used to working out with a team then kind of find it hard as an adult runner to do those kind of workouts on your own.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a valid consideration.
Yeah. The thing I would say about this, though, is that we have regularly worked with athletes on, and I'm thinking one in particular, she had a Friday 5 workout with her friends. So that we just built that into the plan, right? That was an important social thing. So that's just built in. So I think a good coach will also ask you about those things to help ensure that, like, okay, what is it about the social element? Is it that you're literally doing the same workout, or is it that you're just doing it at the same time? And, a coach shouldn't just say, well, I only give workouts on Tuesdays and Thursdays, when maybe the club does Mondays and Wednesdays. Okay, well then let's do the workouts Mondays and Wednesdays. Do you meet your social element by us at least scheduling the workouts at the same time?
Yeah, and you can do a warm up and a cool down with everybody else.
Right.
And, I mean, you and I have also, individually or together worked with teams that included people we coached individually. And we have always tried to, when possible, maybe write a parallel workout that's easy to do alongside the group. Or if it makes sense, maybe a few times we are going to just, if we were going to do 4 by 1200 and the club is doing 3 by a mile, maybe that's close enough. So I think having a coach doesn't mean that you're never going to do another workout with your friends.
Right. And, I feel like I keep saying we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I think we will talk about the open communication with a coach is so critical for all of these reasons. Cost or not being fast enough or wanting to run with friends, these are not insurmountable things with the right coach, right? Whether that's a payment plan or whether that's, like, as we have done, consultation sessions where if somebody's asking for, hey, like, I want to start in like a month or two, I think many coaches, especially if we're talking about a long-term relationship, will be totally willing to have that like 1 hour of like, here's what you should do for the next month. So that way, when you do start up formally and I'm giving you workouts, I kind of know what you've been doing because I've given you some direction. We then have, I'm not currently signed up for something. And that's also, I think, fair. It kind of like, I don't really have a race coming up. This, for me, fits in the bucket of what are your goals? You can still want to maintain your athleticism. You can still want to be challenged. And I feel like in New York, because we have the 9+1 for the New York Road Runners in order to get into the NYC Marathon, everyone is constantly racing. And I put it in quotes because sometimes, it's just showing up to the thing and like trotting the 4 miles just so that it's like it counts as part of the 9+1. But many people still, run those. And so there's always this like constant race. So I think not being currently signed up for something is something we should also normalize. I don't think that is a thing that means that you are not worthy of coaching. Again, that comes down to what your goals are, right?
And I think in some of those cases, even if you don't, maybe work and life is not allowing you to commit to a marathon cycle or a half marathon cycle, but coaching can still provide you. There's plenty of people that just like the training more than the racing. I think that's a lot of us. And I think if that's the case, then invest in the training.
Yeah.
Just doing a PDF plan for a marathon and then not actually having a marathon is not that fun. Whereas I think if you have a coach and you have that relationship, it can still kind of feel like you're accomplishing something and you are having those conversations. So I think in some ways coaching can sort of stand in for other goals if that's, where you are.
Well, it can also make it fun. Like, I think if you're just out there running easy the entire time, which is also totally fine. But I think having some workouts can also just be fun. Having a fartlek workout, having a hill workout. There are general performance and health benefits that come with, training and racing. So it also can mean that if you are not signed up for something, but a number of your friends are, then like kind of back to that social element that you're still you can kind of reminisce and be in the mix. And so, there's no right or wrong. The main thing that we would want to dispel in this section is that if there was a coach who said that like, you're not fast enough for me, that's probably then fine. He or she is probably helping you realize that that's probably not the coach for you. Did we cover off this last bullet point on our what I'm doing?
I think the one we didn't cover is what you're doing is working.
Yeah.
And I think if you're enjoying it, if you're doing, you're writing your own workouts, or you have a training plan that you've been using that's working.
You self-coached.
I
coached yourself.
I loved coaching myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I did have a coach for a while. I had your coach.
I would argue that it's also made you a better coach.
Yeah, I think for sure. And I don't think that's the case for everybody. Not everyone is sort of the temperament for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had much more success self-coaching than with a coach. And I think that was more because that was not the right coach for me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think, not having a coach, again, does not mean that you're not serious or committed to improving.
Yeah. You don't need to get one for the sake of having one. I think that comes back to the legitimacy point of having one doesn't mean you are more serious, to your point. Yeah. Right. Is there anything else on what's preventing runners from hiring a coach? Did we cover everything?
I think we covered everything. At least the usual points.
A lot of the usual points. As we expand and do this podcast, I think one of the things that I hope we hear from people listening is what are other things that they think that we missed that, in a version 2 of this, if we do another version of this
or
next
questions
year. Or questions
could have come up as they listened.
Okay. So I think this next section, I'd like to see if you want to do it a little differently with me. So this is about how can a coach help? There are so many things in here, but I'd like to ask you a general question. When you think of yourself as a coach, what are the things that you, Molly, want to help people with?
So I love problem solving, and not necessarily just in a how do we make you faster. That's one that I enjoy, especially with runners that have kind of hit that plateau that we've talked about. But I think for me, we coach a lot of different types of athletes, different ages, different goals. And I feel like I am providing something different to everybody. I'm trying to help the person develop into the runner and athlete that they want to be, and whatever that means. And for some people, I feel like my biggest utility is kind of reassuring them when they're feeling insecure about a workout or nervous because the workout sounds hard, and trying to kind of give people the confidence to give themselves a shot at it. Sometimes it's problem solving through an injury, and how do we keep you training in a way that's safe, that's not benching you, where you can still be making progress towards the long-term goal, even if the short-term goal has to be postponed.
Yeah. I think you are very good at helping our athletes, and me as one of your athletes, feel like we're not alone in whatever it is that we're going through, right? I've had a number of injuries. It's one of the things that for me matters a whole lot. When I think of the conversations that we have with a lot of our athletes, the first 5 to 10 minutes is like, how did the last week feel? And the specific workouts. We usually close with 5 or 10 minutes of what are we going to program? But the vast majority of our discussion is all of the stuff that is between the ears. And I don't mean that like we're their psychologist. I mean the problem solving, the working through how to get the best out of the athlete. How can they maximize what it is that they have? And for most people who are not professional athletes, they are trying to maximize the time that they have. And so I don't think there's been a single athlete that we've coached that didn't have 1 to 2 weeks of a vacation or a work thing. And 2 weeks can be a decent amount of time. People worry about missing 2 weeks and how that affects their training. And those are the moments that I think that a coach can be, especially one that's tuned into you and understands some of the things that stress you out, and to help alleviate some of that stress, to help you work through that so that you can have some confidence in going through those 2 weeks or whatever it is. or we had an athlete that got sick, 3 weeks before her event, and reminding her that like a lot of the gains from our training has already been implemented and it'll have some impact, but the event that she was doing, like the impact that it was probably going to have in terms of like top end speed for being sick for a week, that it wasn't going to have as much of an impact on like on her ability to do a 12-hour race. So I think working through those things are as like both an emotional support, but also as a like, it's not just emotional support, like it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay because of this is what training does. This is what the science says. This is how we can make the most of what it is that we have.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is potentially, it can be like an intimate relationship you have with somebody, because you are kind of working through people's worries and fears. And it is like a vulnerable space that you're entering, which I think is why trust is so important. But when I think about, two of the people that I coached, I became, very close friends. And I think some of that was, part of it was like, we were talking every day about how they felt and what was going on and what other things were going on that contributed to the running. And that's not the relationship everybody has with their coach. It's not what everybody wants, but I think it can be that level of kind of an involvement.
Right.
So I think that is, it is running for a lot of people, I think, is an extension of things they're working through in some sense or another. And it's affected by lots of other things in your life. And that is where I think it's helpful to have somebody on your team.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just want, like, I think especially if you don't have a big running community, they want somebody else to be excited about their workout, or somebody to talk to about their workout that's not going to like roll their eyes and be like, yes, how did your 10x400s feel?
Right. I would point out that, of course, a coach can help you creating an individualized plan and workout, but that is not, I think, where a good coach will have all of their benefit for you. Having an individualized plan is absolutely critical, but I feel like that's like the bare minimum bar that you should be expecting from a coach.
That to me is competence. That's not necessarily
right.
the mark of a good
And we're
coach.
not saying that like a coach is solely about like being your friend and helping you through things. It is a competent person to help you navigate this athletic element of your life in a way that is clear and structured and objective. In addition to obviously like, how do we then move or manage the individualized plan that you have? Okay, so making sure we got everything on the list. Individualized plan and workouts. Providing feedback and analysis. Certainly midweek, they should be asking questions so that if you're being given marathon pace, half marathon pace, threshold pace, whatever, that should also feel right. And they should be asking you questions to assess whether you're also executing it correctly. So for me, a major element of how can a coach help is to help you feel confident that you're actually executing the workout correctly. I think it's very easy even if you like the plan that is in a book and it happens to be great for you, and I will plug episode 2 about how to modify a plan. It's a longer episode, but it's packed with a ton of I'm biased by saying this, but a ton of really good information for how you would modify a training plan. But even if it was good for you and you weren't making modifications, or you've already made your modifications, it's hard to always remember what marathon pace feels like, particularly as you age and like things change. And so having that analysis and that feedback of somebody that you can say, like, this is how I'm feeling after each workout, you have then somebody that can help you navigate that. How is it making your body feel? And is that consistent with what a good coach should understand how that workout should feel in terms of the purpose of it?
Yeah. And I think that's also where, for some coaches, that will be data driven as well.
For sure. Heart rate, all that type of stuff. Okay. We also have race planning and strategy. Obviously, if you're signed up for something and you want to make sure that you execute that well, and you want to understand how to best attack a course that has a hill here and a hill there and a flat stretch here and lots of crowd support or very little crowd support or time of the year. I love those conversations when we're talking about tactics, because that to me is part of the plan. I think the last bit, and you do more of this for us, is around integrating strength and cross training. You have some certifications in this area. What are the things that you think about when you are trying to help an athlete integrate strength and cross training? And maybe if you can give an answer for somebody who is doing very little, like the conversation we just had with an athlete of she knows she needs to do it, versus an athlete that like does a lot of it, but maybe is, or at least more comfortable going to the gym, but still needs some structure.
Right. I would say, yeah, kind of those two buckets. First of all, I think with any athlete, the first thing I'm going to look at, if it's somebody that we haven't worked with before, is like, what were you not doing that we can introduce that makes sense for you? And often the answer is strength.
Yeah.
I think that is the most common immediate sort of hole to plug for a lot of people. And especially given that we work with a lot of marathon and ultra athletes in particular, there's a lot of benefits to, because you're just on your feet for so long, even beyond like sort of the kind of strength you might do for shorter events where you're really just trying to develop power. Some of what we're doing is just trying to get people strong enough to be out there for 12 hours or 24 hours or running hard for 2 or 3 hours. And then, as you said, you kind of either have the people that really aren't doing any strength, and I think,
but usually know that that's a thing that they
should be doing. And I think just in the general culture now, there's a lot more awareness of the benefits of strength, particularly as you age, and how important that is.
Yeah.
You know, aerobic fitness is not enough.
But what's funny is the reluctance sometimes. I mean, we were at a team that we coach on their Monday night, and somebody said to me, I would rather do an hour and a half, 2 hours of running than 30 minutes in the gym.
Yeah.
And like, just absolute, like totally like acknowledged. I completely understand that is not the right trade-off. That like, I understand that.
Well, I think, he then went on to say like, it's so boring. Yeah. And I think that's the problem for most people. And like it is kind of boring, especially if you're a runner and you're used to like watching stuff go by and like all the things that we enjoy about running, and you're outside. And so yes, it is boring. Often.
Or intimidating.
Yeah. And I think that's the other one is it's intimidating. I don't know what to do. I get to the gym. I'm not sure like how to use the machines, and I feel like I don't belong and everybody's looking at me. But getting people to lift heavier and feel confident doing that, I think, is usually the biggest hurdle, because one, people think they're going to get hurt.
They're going to get bulky.
And
let's just dispel that notion right now. Yeah. Unless you are in the gym 4 or 5 days a week, crushing protein, and
it doesn't happen accidentally.
Yeah, it doesn't happen accidentally. There is a big gulf between being really fit and strong and then being a bodybuilder and bulking.
I think it's the equivalent of saying like, I'm going to do maintenance runs 3 days a week, but I don't want to get too fast. Like that, like as though that just happens accidentally.
I think it's a good, I think it's a good analogy.
So I think those are kind of the two camps that we often are trying to get people feeling comfortable, knowing what to do, feeling safe and competent in doing those things. There's a decent amount you can do without a ton of weight, that's, especially if you're not lifting currently, that's going to help. So I think that's kind of step one. And then step two is getting people to the gym, kind of giving them some pointers on what to do. You know, when possible, it's great if we can go with somebody, but if it's somebody we're coaching remotely, that's not always possible. But, you know, there's some decent videos out there of people doing lifts, I think, that I would trust to give to somebody. And I think making sure people have the cues, or better yet, just encouraging them to like go to a trainer a couple of times to get comfortable, like learn the machines, learn the movements.
Anything else in this section, Molly, about how a coach can help?
Well, we didn't really talk about cross training.
Oh, that's fair.
Which I think is an important question if you're trying to find a coach, and if cross training is something that is important to you, either because you really enjoy cycling and that's an important part of your week you don't want to give up, or you're somebody that you can't handle a high mileage plan, but you want to get more time in. Having somebody that is at least willing to program cross training, I think, in a way that is more than just go ride a bike for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It's an important thing to ask if that is an important part of your week.
For some people, I think, and we have an athlete that it's an essential part of being able to do the running. He's an older athlete, but it means that he needs more time for recovery. And 6 days a week of running is not as useful for him than doing 4 days or 5 days and then 1 or 2 days of cycling. And that allows him to get in being athletic and some degree of activity, so that he's maintaining some fitness. Is he losing some specificity? Sure. But he's also gaining the ability to not pound his
he's
joints.
Still getting to the starting line healthy.
He's getting to the starting line healthy. And so I think if you're a person who you need some cross training, kind of goes without saying, all of these things that we're talking about should be a discussion point with a coach that you are interviewing for. It shouldn't just be a like, oh, you're fast, so that's a good enough qualification for me. You should be asking them about these things. What is your experience with cross training? Okay. What are some of the things we've talked about, how coaches can help? How are some of the ways that we think coaches can help, but perhaps are not as equipped as we think? And I'll open up, because I know you've done some reading on this. I'll open up with gait analysis, and would love you to delve into your thoughts. We hear a lot of like, do you do gait analysis? I think years ago, I remember that being a thing that like every PT offered, and
a lot of coaches offered. That was the first session, was your gait analysis.
Right. And so maybe talk a little bit about the realities of gait analysis and how useful or not it is or can be.
I feel like this is a whole episode that we will eventually do, but I have strong feelings about it. It is not something that we offer. And I will start with the science, which is well captured by a study that was done in 2020 that took, I think it was 120-ish coaches, and they ranged from youth coaches through elite athlete coaches.
So a diverse range of coaches.
A diverse range, and that was kind of the point, and different amounts of experience between the coaches as well. And then they took 5 runners who they had done VO2 max testing on and efficiency. And I will do the slight aside to remind everyone that efficiency we tend to think of as being like a purely biomechanical thing. I think the easy analogy is sort of it's your fuel efficiency. So you could think of, if you're going to say VO2 max is the size of your engine, you could have a truck and a sports car with the same size engine, but they're going to go very different speeds for the same amount of fuel.
Mm-hmm.
So efficiency is about how well you utilize your engine to output speed, and that will vary. And that is somewhat due to biomechanics. If you kind of take it to the extreme, if you were to run while waving your arms above your head, waving your arms is taking energy, but it's not making you go faster. So it's sort of how are you leaking energy, and then how are you using the energy available to turn it directly into speed. So that is sort of how we scientifically classify the efficiency of an athlete. So this study took 5 athletes that had statistically significant differences in VO2 max. They had them run all the same pace. They gave it in meters per second, but what it worked out to was, I think, about a 7.5 minute mile. So,
but all athletes with different levels of measured efficiency is, right, I think, the key thing here.
But they were all running the same.
And statistically different levels of efficiency.
Correct. And VO2 max.
Right.
Which you wouldn't be able to observe, but contributes. So they were all running a 7.5 minute mile, which I think, across abilities, that's not a shuffle for anybody. It should be a pretty rolling gait at that pace, which I think is important if you're going to try to judge somebody's efficiency. But it asked these 120 coaches they videoed the runners from multiple angles. The coaches were shown the videos and were told to rank the runners basically in what they thought was most efficient to least. And what they found was there was no correlation between amount of experience, who they coached, no metric correlated to being good at observing and correctly predicting efficiency. So you would sort of think...
Did they also find, even if there was no correlation of like the type of coach, did they also find that like everyone was just bad at it?
Yeah, it's very hard to do visually.
Yeah.
Even with multiple angles and video, it's not like you're even just watching somebody go by on a track and it's over quick.
Yeah. I mean, I think to expect the human eye and brain to understand force and what your tendons are doing, and people are forefoot strikers, midfoot strikers, backfoot strikers. I think a lot of people bring their own like biases of what they believe is a more efficient stride. I would hazard a guess that most people looking at you run, because you're a forefoot striker, would just knock you down a couple points.
Yeah.
Which would be completely and utterly unfair. But I think that it's because we've ingrained this, like a midfoot is like a more efficient way of running. But that doesn't mean that like you cannot be efficient with a different midfoot, right? And that is probably more correlation than causation anyway.
Yeah. So I think the point we're getting at is somebody that tells you they can do a visual gait analysis, it's probably not really going to be terribly accurate. They may make some observations that maybe you're a little asymmetric, maybe your elbows stick out. Like there are things you can see.
I think this is where I want, by the way, for our podcast, the like sound effects where like from Top Gun when he goes bullshit. Like I would have that as if a coach says I do gait analysis, and then just play that sound bite. So
so that it's not to say that there's not observable things, or not to say that there's not biomechanical things that could contribute to pain in your knee, or these are real things.
Right.
Thinking that you can isolate them visually is extremely difficult. And if it's not causing you pain and you don't have a problem, you don't know, your body will naturally find its most efficient movement pattern. And I think where you and I try to point people is either do some drills, if you need to develop better knee drive, like there are drills you can do that will help sort of ingrain those movements. And then also strength is often, when you're seeing imbalances from one side to the other, often there's also a strength difference.
Well, this is, I think, the second piece for me that makes when people talk about gait analysis. So even if somebody was good at it, which as we
you have like a mechanical force plate measurement. Right.
And there are, physical therapy places often have these. It's usually a bit more scientific and they're measuring lots of different things and and you get actual data out of it. I think the second piece where a lot of coaches, PTs, etc., fall down in advising an athlete is then what to do with that information. And too often, and I loathe, as I know you do, this like you got to get to 180 steps per minute, or we have to fix your foot strike. We have to work on your bounding. We've got to work on your arms. And I think to your point, unless there's something wrong, as we know and is repeatedly confirmed over and over again with efficiency, is that the more you run and the longer that you run, the more efficient your body will get. Should you do strength, coming back to the cross training and integrating strength into your coaching? For sure. And addressing strength imbalances is absolutely important. And can a gait analysis help you identify where some of those strength imbalances are? Yes. And that's where I think a really good technician and specialist, be that a coach or a physical therapist, looking at the data, looking at the video and saying, okay, we're not going to arbitrarily just like try and get you to 180 beats. Yeah.
Or decide you need to be a midfoot striker.
Right. But especially if you're coming in with some knee pain and you do that analysis and, or some hip pain and you're like, okay, well, we can actually kind of see where that might be coming from when we look at, your right leg versus your left leg. These are some of the things that we're going to work on. That is a far more effective way of doing it.
I think the final point there is it's also really hard to fix these things with your brain, which is generally what you're then asked to do.
Yeah.
I think after a gait analysis, it's either like run with a metronome so you can get your cadence up.
Right.
Or, think about your foot strike or think about your knee drive. And
think about your...
Well, the problem is like your executive brain that's the one doing the instruction kind of thoughts is not your motor center.
Mm-hmm. So
you're kind of using the wrong side of your brain to try to control motion anyway, which makes it more awkward and you're not really ingraining it in a useful way. And also the minute your executive brain is distracted, you're going to fall into your old pattern. So I highly recommend Zen and the Art of Tennis. It's kind of all about this phenomenon and how you actually teach movement. It doesn't matter if you don't play tennis, but I think that is kind of where people maybe go astray in trying to like, quote unquote, fix something is trying to think their way to a different movement pattern.
Yeah.
I think the other, while we're on the subject of expectations, that people sometimes bring to coaching is that suddenly there's going to be a new world of like magic workouts, or that a coach created individualized plan is going to look super different from, maybe the group plan they were using or the plan from a book. There's only so many good workouts out there. And I think actually if your coach is really overcomplicating things and making up really convoluted workouts, that probably is a red flag, actually.
Yeah.
It probably shouldn't look that different than like a tried and true plan that you would find in the back of Jack Daniel's book or something.
Right.
That's not to say that there's not a lot of benefit and thought that the coach should be giving to your individual needs.
Well, and also like when those things are placed and
happens.
What fitness you came into the cycle with, all of those types of things that help you determine when and where you put those workouts. But I think to that point, if you go into it expecting that the plan is going to look very different and then you get disappointed.
Yeah.
Maybe at surface level, it doesn't look different, but I think a good coach probably doesn't look that different. It's just more thoughtful in terms of how it's like, what are the number of reps? A bad plan could be, if we take two workouts that look very similar on paper, it might be 4x800 at a, say, threshold pace versus a half marathon pace, or 6x800 or 7x800 at, marathon or something like that.
Yeah. Or do you particularly need more reps at that pace, or do you need shorter rests? How are we going to progress that?
And so you might be saying, well, my previous plan had 800s and now my current plan has 800s. Like, what am I paying you for? But it's in the, like, how long are the rests and how many reps and what are the pace? There's three different knobs that we can turn. And so on its face, those might look like they're the same workout from your group plan, and so you're disappointed that your coach isn't putting thought into it. But that's what goes into ultimately trusting your coach, and to the extent that you build that trust and making sure that you're understanding the purpose of the workout and that it is tailored to meet your needs. So I think that actually goes nicely into our next section, which is we've talked about how a coach can help you, and there are many things that coaches bring to the table, and we also talked about some of the things that they can't bring to the table. But in order for us to help identify the right coach for us, we need to think about what is it that we need. And it's important that we understand how we can best communicate with our coaches, in the case of Matt and Molly. What is it that we want out of coaching, and understanding our primary drivers for finding a coach, having a coach, utilizing a coach. So with that said, what are some of the other things that we hear a lot in athletes looking for and wanting coaches, and what it is that they are using as a litmus test to help them identify the right person?
Yeah, I think you and I try to communicate early on, I think, what we're good at and what we are less good at. So we probably end up with somewhat self-selection, I think, in who comes to us. But I think the point is not all coaches are going to be good at all the things that we talked about. You know, if you want somebody if you're really just there for performance and that's all you want is really great workouts, there are people that can do that well. If you want a cheerleader, I'm going to encourage you all the way, but I am not going to be bubbly and leave 4 exclamation points on every workout. And if that's what you need, that's okay. But I am not the person for that. I think, again, if you want accountability, there's probably other ways to do that aren't necessarily coaching.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then the other one that I think you and I get a lot, because we are sort of probably a bit more performance driven, is people coming to us really wanting to be pushed. And I think in our experience,
pushed, challenged.
I want to work harder than I am already pushing myself is usually the subtext of that.
Yeah.
And I think 100% of the time, in my recollection, those are the athletes that we actually end up trying to pull back, maybe edit. They have 20 races on the calendar that you can't possibly peak for all of them. If you are that athlete, I think it's also important to reflect a little bit on, you probably don't need somebody to push you even harder. What the relationship with your coach might be a little more collaborative in terms of channeling what you're doing in a more focused way, or making sure that you're not going into your race overtrained. So I think that is one in particular that a lot of athletes that are, goal oriented and performance driven might have an expectation going into a coaching relationship, and finding that they need to change that perception a little bit.
Yeah. I think for anybody who has a day job of working with clients, I think it's helpful to put yourself in the mindset and saying, what are some of the challenges that you might have with clients? And one of the biggest ones is if they don't know what it is that they want.
Yeah.
Right. And if they don't know what it is that you want, then anything that you throw at them is going to be like, that's not exactly what it is that I want. So I think if you're not thinking critically about what it is that you want and need, it's going to be hard for a coach to read your mind and provide that for you. It also means then that you might pick a coach that is not actually that.
Yeah.
And to your point, all of these things that we've talked about of what a coach can do, perhaps we should have made this disclaimer before, but not all coaches can do all of those things equally well. Like, we love getting into the data, and we love getting into helping somebody really navigate a complex training cycle, or they've got unique challenges. That's particularly fun for us. It helps us feel a little bit more engaged in the process. It helps the athlete feel a little bit more engaged in the process. So yeah, different coaches will have different styles for sure. That leads into then how you best communicate with the coach. I think in our intake form, we ask a number of questions about how do you like to best communicate? Because we will have feedback and comments. We want feedback and comments from the athlete. Sometimes they use the app. Sometimes we have a text chain. Sometimes we have a, bi-weekly. Yeah, we have a bi-weekly call. I would say almost for any coaching relationship. I think if a coach is just dropping workouts in and they never talk to you, they never check in, and you're never communicating back. Obviously, there's some coaching relationships where you've had for years, and like you know, no news is good news. And so I'm not saying that that's like an absolute rule. I would just say that it's more often than not, I think, regular and open communication to some degree you should be having.
Yeah.
What else on the communication side do you think we should be highlighting?
I think engagement with data or not on the part of the athlete. It's important to me. I mean, it's on our coaching form.
Yep.
Is like, do you want to know the purpose of the workout? And how much of that do you want to engage with? I think is an important question. There are athletes I've worked with where, we worked together for years and communicated super well. And it became very much a collaboration when we would put together a training cycle. Other athletes very much don't want to think about it and don't really care why we're doing this workout right now, as opposed to a month from now. Both of those are fine. But understanding what the athlete wants and doesn't want is super important as a coach to me, that I'm not overloading them with information they don't care about, or I also don't want them to feel like they're just getting a plan in the dark and they don't know why they're doing things.
Yeah. Different athletes will want different levels of engagement in, are they outsourcing a lot of that, or are they interested but want the experience of somebody else? Meaning I'm outsourcing it in its entirety, just put it in the plan. And I feel like I used to be that athlete. Just give me something, I will do it, likely without question. And that was where I was at that stage in my running life. I didn't really know what to do. So I didn't feel equipped to challenge. I also felt bad challenging. I think that I realize now that it's okay to ask questions. If you're not asking any questions, you may not be engaged enough in the process. If your coach is not asking you questions, they may not be engaged enough, especially when you're still trying to figure out somebody or you're navigating through something. There should be some intentionality with the communication, because that also instills trust. I've also shifted over my athletic career towards wanting to understand a bit more of the why behind something and being a bit more engaged in the process of constructing a plan that works. Both are fine approaches. They might be, as they were for me, different parts of my athletic life.
Yeah. There's a Bill Bowerman quote, which I don't remember verbatim, but the gist was that his goal for all of his athletes at Oregon was that they would eventually not need him. And I think that's, to me, a goal, whether somebody still enjoys having a coach. Like, it doesn't mean you can't continue that relationship. But I think equipping athletes to be able to understand what they're doing, and if they want to do a cycle on their own, or eventually their relationship with running changes and they want to coach themselves, like that, I'm hoping that what I'm giving somebody is enough information that they can do that in an informed way.
Yeah. I think the last thing that we can close out would be to think about how much flexibility you need in that plan.
Yeah.
We have probably about a dozen athletes right now, and they are the entire spectrum of, I've got a bit of a hectic life right now, and I constantly need to move things around. And so we then need to work closely with making sure that those modifications still allow him to get adaptations that make sense, while not boxing us into a corner with like how that week is set up for him. Other athletes, they like the very regimented way of doing things, and so it's very structured, and they generally don't change things, and they like the routine, and it works for them and their life. So I think understanding how much flexibility that you might need and want in a plan is also important. But are there any other aspects of flexibility that you would want to highlight here?
Again, it's just something you need to be able to communicate to your coach so that they can appropriately accommodate that. And there are coaches that use the lock function on Training Peaks so that you can't move anything. Yeah. And that might not be the approach you need if you're somebody that has a lot of schedule changes in your job, or you have kids or whatever. And it just means you have to juggle a little bit more.
I will say just one more thing on the data piece is that we used to have just VDOT. We now have Training Peaks, and we choose which makes the most sense for the athlete at hand. Sometimes people don't need and want the data. And so we go with the VDOT approach. If somebody's looking for a ton of data and a ton of analysis, we then suggest Training Peaks. So yeah, I mean, again, there's even in the technology, there's different levels of like what data is available, and sometimes that overloads people. And so I think to that point of if you're a coach where like you're extremely data driven and you want to sit down with the athlete and talk about all of these things, for some athletes that's just not the level of detail that they need. Not because I think they're not invested in it, but because there are some people for which data is just not a natural thing. And so sitting down and talking about it might actually feel overwhelming.
Or it becomes a point of stress.
Right. Or it becomes a point of stress. I think you're absolutely right. Too much fixation on data is not a good thing, especially if it's not actionable. Okay, so we've talked about understanding and articulating what is it that I as an athlete need, but let's translate that into something that's usable. And so there are a lot of questions that we've wrote down, maybe some that we want to add along the way. I'll start off with a couple of questions that you as an athlete can ask a coach that they should have some thought or view on. Not having a thought or view on on any particular one may not be problematic, but I think we would make the case that they should have a view on most of these. And if they don't have a view on most of these, then I would posit that more likely than not, that person is not thinking consciously or hard enough about the seriousness with which training somebody and coaching somebody, and what that takes. So the first would be, do they either on their website or bilaterally, are they talking about a particular philosophy or approach? We're not saying they have to be experts in Lydiard or in Jack Daniels or in Hansen's, but that they should have some form of understanding about how is it that they construct plans.
Yeah. And I would add to that I actually think if they operate exclusively within one of those systems and they are certified within that system, for example, then you are sort of bound to that system working for you.
Right.
And that may be a case where it may or it may not. And so I think if you're working with somebody that's a really high mileage coach, and I think this comes up like when you're listening to interviews with pros too, people went to Bowerman Track Club. That was a very high mileage system that did not work for all the athletes. And so that's something that you if you're new to running or you're new to coaching, you might need to feel that out with a coach. But I think if somebody is exclusively, I use Lydiard and that's the kind of training plan we're going to do, those are things that at least as an athlete, if I heard that and I was interviewing coaches, I would at least want to then go home and
understand.
If I didn't know what Lydiard meant,
right,
I would want to understand what that means.
Yeah.
So I think a coach being able to at least articulate a point of view.
What would you say RRCA is largely like? There's a ton of coaches that are just RRCA. I would say that it is probably more of a like Daniels style. But do you think I'm wrong on that?
It's a little bit like Lydiard light. It's not high mileage. I think that would differ from maybe a classical Lydiard, what Arthur Lydiard did approach.
Mm-hmm. But they do talk about pace charts, I think.
They do talk about pace charts. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a little bit of a hybrid, but I think in terms of like, they are pretty pedantic about like, you have base building.
Right.
It's sort of a
periodization
plan in the sense of you're going to do base and then you're going to do some threshold and then you're going to end it with speed. And like, it's a very sort of classic generic-ish distance plan.
Right. And so I think if somebody says to you, well, I'm RSCA certified, or that's like the sort of the primary certification, that's probably then their perspective, even if they don't know that that's what it's called. Okay. Second question. How much experience does the coach have with runners like you? If they're a coach that almost exclusively works with sub-elite and elite athletes, and they are not using, from a coaching perspective, the parts of their brain for people for whom that is just not where they are, that just because they are a good coach that can coach fast people does not mean that they are a coach that understands how to adapt that plan for somebody who is maybe a 4-hour marathon person. And there's absolutely no judgment whatsoever in any of that on both the part of the athlete and the coach. That might be a very good coach and you are a very good athlete, but understanding that if somebody doesn't have a whole lot of experience in working with athletes in your pace range, or at least can articulate how they would approach working with you and why and how that would be different, that I think would be something that you'd want to have as an open discussion.
Yeah. And I think this is where a little bit we get in trouble when we say like pace doesn't matter. I mean, pace doesn't matter in the sense that you're still just as entitled to really good coaching, regardless of pace. However, the way pace translates into your race experience and what you need very much matters. Like somebody that can run a half marathon in an hour 15 has very different fueling needs than somebody that's going to take 2.5 hours. One of those is well beyond potentially your glycogen stores, and you're going to have to fuel that differently than the person that's done in a bit over an hour.
Yeah.
The same thing I think goes for marathoners that are in the 5 to 6 hour range. You might actually be wanting to talk to somebody that has some ultra experience, that is used to training people and fueling people for a time on feet in that range. It's going to be very different than somebody that works primarily with 3-hour marathoners.
Okay, third question. What are their qualifications and certifications? This is a tricky one, I think, because certifications don't necessarily mean a ton.
No.
Because I think we, at least in New York, saw a boom of people in New York getting RRCA certified. I don't think going to a weekend's worth of classes makes you inherently a good coach.
It doesn't even really teach you that much about
coaching. And certainly not a lot of the stuff that we talked about in terms of like how to help problem solve and navigate, right?
Yeah. It's mostly how to not get in trouble.
Right.
How to deal with the liabilities of coaching, running a business. I mean, it's all good information, but it does not. I think you and I know a lot of people that have either toyed with or actually gone through RRCA training because they wanted to learn how to write plans. And that's like 2 hours of RRCA certification.
Yeah. Half of it is like just the business of being a run coach.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think seeing a bunch of like certifications, that's fine. It shows that there's some degree of like professional development, but you'd want to look for like experience beyond the letters of being RRCA certified.
I have done USATF as well, which I think was far more rigorous. You're also learning how to coach all the events, including throws. So there again, I think there's a rigor to it. There's more science to it for sure. There's more discussion of workouts. It is geared far more to the sprint end. And it's only 3 days or something, I think. So, and you're spreading that over a number of events, including throws and jumps and things that may not apply to a lot of our audience. So again, I think it demonstrates that you're willing and interested in learning these things, which is a good thing. But again, inherently just having the certification doesn't mean that the person is equipped to deal with the complexities of coaching.
Well, I'm biased, I think, in saying this, but I would say that our value as coaches from a certification perspective or from a professional development perspective is like nowhere near on paper. It's hopefully conversations like this where we're demonstrating competence, but it's the every Wednesday study drop that you get where you're looking and understanding at what are, prominent researchers that constantly come up and apply rigor to their studies. What are they saying in this space? And so, when you look at RRCA, some of the science in what they teach you is really outdated, super outdated, very old, to the point where you're like, that's the irony of them teaching about liability. Like, you guys should probably update your coaching here because it's not scientifically accurate anymore. Yeah. It was written
at
years
least
ago
when we took it. Which was,
fair. Maybe it's updated, but those are the things that I think matter a great deal, which is how are you keeping on top of current understanding of how our body works. And a lot of that's not going to be.
It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be reading the latest research papers, but I do think nutrition science has changed a lot. Even in the time that I've been coaching, I have changed my opinions on some things. Shoe technology obviously is a new one that everybody's kind of constantly trying to stay current on. And I think if you're dealing with somebody that really hasn't updated their opinions in 15 years, if you have not changed your mind on something, I think that's a red flag. Or if you have not gotten up to speed on new technology or new thinking.
Yeah. Okay. The next thing that I really puts a bee in my bonnet is when almost the first thing that a coach puts out there is how fast they are or were a D1, runner. I just don't think that there is a good correlation between the fact that you were or are fast and that some workouts work for you and whether you are good at all of the things that we just talked about. To borrow from an analogy that I used earlier, we have a better ability to understand and consider whether somebody is a good teacher. And being really good at, say, math or physics and being a brilliant mind does not inherently mean that you are a good teacher of math and physics. So the fact that you were fast does not mean that translates into your ability to articulate and help somebody get the best out of themselves. So this will be in our red flag section as well. But if somebody is saying that like, I can coach because I'm fast, or if you are approaching a coach or filtering coaches based on speed, we would discourage, I think, the use of that as a metric.
Yeah, or a qualification. I mean, I think the analogy I always use is if you've ever tried to learn a foreign language from a native speaker, I think it's actually often a lot harder because they learned it naturally.
Yeah.
And they don't know kind of what trips people up when you're approaching it as not a native speaker.
Yeah.
And I kind of have always found, and maybe this is my own bias, but as somebody that came from sprinting to distance and ultra running, this does not come naturally to me. I am not naturally built for this. And I have to be really, really intentional about my training as a result of that and really understand what works for me and what isn't going to work for me. And I think people that maybe were natural distance runners and ran in college, it's actually, I mean, I have coached a sub-elite team and it was less interesting, I think, as a coach than working with people that are more of a mixed bag. Because we know what works for people that are built for this. It's actually like, you just have to not mess it up. Yeah. Whereas I think when you are maybe less natural at it or coming to it from a different sport, you haven't done this your whole life, having a coach that didn't ever have that problem, they kind of know what worked for them, but they may not know what works for other people. And that's where I don't think it's a problem if you were fast. That's great.
Sure.
And especially if you're somebody that really needs like race tactics and knows what it's like to be at the front, then that is the right person for you. But I think if you're somebody that is not that person, working with somebody purely because they are themselves good at running.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a good example would be, I think I am fortunate in that I am a front of the pack person. Me talking about how I would approach a race as a front of the pack person solely from that perspective to a person that is not a front of the pack person is a little bit just kind of deaf to what it is that person might need. If I'm like, oh yeah, you really got to pay attention to the tangents.
If you're in the middle of the New York Marathon, in the middle of the pack, like you have no options for tangents.
Right.
Forget that.
Yeah. There's no like try to be on the left side or the right side. It's like, that's a useless thing to talk about. But there are so many examples of that where if a good coach, and I'd like to think that we've endeavored to be that, will make an effort to understand and talk to athletes about their experience. If we're coaching somebody to a 4-hour marathon, I want to speak to other people who are 4-hour marathoners about their experience to understand what works, what has worked well and what has not. And so that I can then help synthesize that information and share that with the athlete accordingly from the perspective of my experience coaching and speaking with athletes, not my personal experience running the New York City Marathon.
Yeah.
Okay. So we just talked about a couple of questions that you should be asking, but they should also be asking you questions. You should almost, it's almost a little bit of a test of like, is that coach going to be asking you questions? Because if they're not, it likely means that they think they already have the answers. I know this is how I approach training. This is how I approach giving workouts. This is what's going to work. So if they're not asking you questions like, what is your training history? Do you have an injury history? What are your goals, both time and, time goals, qualitative goals? What does success look like? That fulsome discussion is something that a coach should want to have with you. If they're not having that, it logically then follows that it is hard for them to modify a workout to fit your needs if they're not really taking the time to understand what your needs are, where you're coming into the training cycle from, your previous training. It's very different if we're going to coach somebody who's got 5 years of experience and has recently come off of a marathon cycle versus somebody who hasn't run as much. They're dealing with shin splints, and we're trying to figure out how to help them navigate out of a challenging last few months. But if you're not asking a lot of these types of questions, those might be obvious things, but there's a ton of other, I think, small things that you're only going to know if you take the time as a coach to think thoughtfully about the questions that you ask. I sometimes fear that our coach intake form is starting to get too long. But I think if nothing else, I hope that our athletes recognize that it's because we really care about those answers. And if you're not willing to spend 15 minutes on a coach intake form, then maybe that's also a sign that it's not right.
Yeah. I think most runners are very happy to spend 15 or 20 minutes thinking about running thoughtfully. Yeah. I think the other one is asking about your long-term goals and not simply in I want to be cute or, those kind of big, more or less like obvious ones. But I mean, I think part of the utility of a good coach is helping you choose races or helping you map out what the next 12 months looks like. And if they're sort of myopically focused on like, okay, you're going to run Chicago, we're going to get you to Chicago, and whatever happens after that is whatever happens. It should be within a broader understanding of what you want to do athletically and where you're going. Not that it necessarily is going to change the day to day exactly, but I think understanding that right now you're training for a half marathon, but you really want to run ultras, it might actually change the way I approach your overall mileage in terms of where I want you to be in a year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've talked about how a coach can help. We've talked about setting expectations of what it is that coaches can and can't do. You've thought thoughtfully. Can I say that? You have thoughtfully considered what is it that you want out of that relationship. And we've now talked about and given a couple of questions that you can ask and expect to be asked in return. So we've now found a coach. You've started this relationship with somebody. How do you then act during the coaching relationship to be coachable? So I'll kick us off with the first thing on our list, which is communication, right? Stemming from everything that we just talked about, that if you don't have open communication, that is like, I don't know, this is a finger in the air, 90%, 80% of what makes having a coach useful and successful is being able to communicate with somebody. Because otherwise, what's the difference between if you're not going to communicate? Sure, you might get something that's a little bit more personalized. Although I would argue that if you're not communicating, it can't be that personalized. But how is it that much different than getting a plan out of a book? And so reaching out to your coach about how you're feeling about something to understand whether you are executing the plan well. I think that's one of the number one things that we talk about with athletes of when we're asking how you felt during that workout, we're trying to gauge whether or not the paces are set accordingly. Because if you've got a bunch of workouts, but they're not set at paces that are actually useful, If they're too fast, then we're potentially running the risk of overtraining that person and setting them up to, for injury. If they're way too slow, that's not good either, because then they're not going to get the adaptation. Maybe they are set appropriately, but they are going way too fast and there's an execution issue. And if we're not asking how they're feeling in the execution of that workout, we may not know, or they may not know, because they're trying to best the workout or beat the workout. So having that open communication, because the data behind that, particularly for the coach, is not going to be able to tell the full story. Having that subjective, how you felt during the workout, is obviously quite critical.
I mean, I would like to think that I am pretty good at like sneaky reading data in workouts. And I do have some metrics that I look at beyond, did they hit the pace in the interval, or what was the long run pace? There are things that I am looking at that can be tells for this was too hard, or, they actually were stopping in between the reps to catch their breath, things like that. But what I can't do, I mean, even kind of getting to that granularity, trying to get under the hood to see how a workout really went, is I still want to hear how they're feeling. And actually, I mean, this goes back to, I think the data shows the best predictor for overtraining is emotionally how you're feeling about running. And when I start to hear people dreading the workout or moving stuff around just because they didn't
multiple times. I mean, there are always going to be days where you're like, I'm just not feeling it today. That doesn't mean you're overtrained. Yeah.
But I think when those patterns start to emerge, that's when, a good coach is going to say, what's up? Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
But unless you're willing to kind of share those things beyond just the pure book report of your workout of, I did the second rep up a hill, so that one was a little bit slower, and then there was some headwind on the fourth one. Like, that's helpful, but I also kind of want to know, were you happy with this at the end? Are you utterly wrung out?
Yeah, you shouldn't be going to the well every single time. And if you are, and if you and your coach are not talking about that,
or you're just saying it went fine,
right?
I hit it.
Right. So I think coming back to the how to be coachable is then being honest with yourself and with your coach. If you're not being honest, then that's bad data.
Yeah.
Because I might think, okay, this person is telling me that they're doing okay. If you're worried about how your coach is going to feel, then either that's on you, and we would encourage you to consider being open. A coach can't read your mind. If they have given reason for you to feel like you are judged in a way because of how you did or didn't execute something, or that you've let them down, then that's obviously like a potential red flag for working with that individual. But not hitting a pace or maybe going too fast or too slow is about constantly thinking about how we calibrate the plan for you. And a good coach should hopefully help you feel like you want to communicate that information. Because otherwise, how else are you going to get the best out of yourself?
Yeah.
Another important one is understanding the purpose of the workout. So part of what we just said was being honest with yourself. The one way to understand whether you are or not being honest with yourself is understanding what you should or shouldn't have done. The only way you will know whether you should or shouldn't have done a workout in a certain way is if you also understand the purpose of that workout. If the purpose of that workout was to get what marathon pace feels like, and you were just feeling like, you know what, I'm going to crush it and like go way faster, not even remotely close to what my marathon pace is, then you've kind of, you've probably then have done a volume that is more than what you should be doing for a faster pace, and therefore tiring yourself out. But B, you're then not achieving the purpose of the workout, which is to help your legs feel what marathon pace feels like.
Yeah. And I think this is something where if your coach doesn't communicate it to you, you should feel free to ask questions. And I think, sometimes our athletes will say like, oh, I feel bad, I don't want to bother you. And like, that is literally what I'm here for. Also, the reason I coach is because I want to talk to runners about running. Like, that's why I'm here. So like, I'm disappointed if you don't want to ask questions. Like, frankly, the runners that say like, oh, just give me the workout. I just want to do it. Like, I'm always disappointed. Like, I feel like I've crafted this thing and it's this like, I want to tell somebody why we're doing what we're doing. So I think feeling free to ask the questions, particularly if there's something like it's 90 degrees out when I'm going to do this workout, can and should I adjust the paces or the distance? What adjustments should I make? Should it be shorter? Should it be slower? And there's been times when there's been like 30-mile-an-hour winds when we put 6 miles of marathon pace on somebody's plan. And we've said like, we're going to swap this with next week because you're just not going to hit that pace. Yeah. There's no point in you working that hard to hit that pace. And I don't want to set you up for being exhausted next week for something that isn't going to get you the adaptation we were looking for. So again, I think those are all reasons why the dialogue is so important and understanding what it is that you're trying to do.
I think working in absolutes is a major danger. Yeah. And even for something like marathon pace or threshold pace, but crushing yourself for trying to hit a pace in order to impress your coach or to have it nice on Strava is an element of, and I'll say this with kindness and love to people who have been there, including myself, is that is the ego talking, that if you're going to get the best out of a coaching relationship, it's going to come from honesty and trust, not from trying to impress or win the workout. And then finally, it is about communicating sooner than later when we're starting to feel pain.
Or tired.
You
know, I think both injuries.
Regularly tired.
Yeah.
Right.
Injuries and overtraining generally come with some warning signs. You know, I'm having this like nagging hamstring thing every time I do speed, and trusting that like they're not going to bench you for that, but they're going to work with you. I would much rather somebody say that and we pull back on speed for 2 weeks than they end up with a torn hamstring in a month.
Yeah. The last thing I'd say in this section before we move to red flags is we've talked a lot about trust and how that is a front and center thing that should be a part of any relationship. Of course, it doesn't mean that you can't question what is it that's going on. And, but I think that if a coach then if you ask a question like, why am I not doing more mileage? Why am I not doing more reps? I see other people doing this. I see other people doing that. What I think you should expect a coach to be able to do is to articulate why they are doing this and not that.
Yeah.
And if that at least helps, like that is a totally reasonable question to ask.
And I think that's how trust is earned.
Right.
You
precisely.
Shouldn't blindly trust that somebody's giving you.
We're not. Precisely. That's why we emphasize asking questions so much, because you as an athlete should be advocating for yourself. Where we would then say you need to be careful is saying, well, I want to be doing more miles, and so I'm going to do more. If a coach has provided a reasonable answer and you ignore that anyway, then I think this is where it's then you get into a tough territory of you didn't get the results you wanted, but you also didn't really follow and execute the plan as designed. And so that's where I think it can be tricky to say then, well, what's the reason why I didn't hit the goal that I was hoping for? Is that because of the plan, or is that because I ignored the plan, or is that because it was poorly executed? Was I not being honest enough? So there's a lot of factors that go into trust, but take the time to earn it and build it mutually. And hopefully that alleviates issues. So we are 2 sections away. We have red flags and then when to potentially leave a coach. So we have a number on here. What is your number 1 red flag, Molly?
They're not listening.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah. If you communicate and you say,
this isn't working. Or
can we please?
Can we talk about whatever? And you're not getting receptivity to that, to at least a conversation.
Or a plan. You might say this isn't working. And then they might say, well, what if we make this little tweak, see if that works. And if that doesn't work, then we'll, right? Yeah. But the point is that they should be listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine is, I think, somebody trying to, I don't even know if we have this on our list. I think, oh, it's not. My red flag is when they're trying to hit some arbitrary way of running, whether that's the 190 steps a minute, or it's a certain type of strike, or it's the gait analysis that we talked about before. I think anybody who's telling you that like you need to run a certain way, I would run away from.
Do you mean that strictly in terms of biomechanics, or do you mean in adherent, like just strict adherence to this is the right method to train for a marathon? Or
I would say both, because as I think we've tried to communicate, there are no absolutes. And so if somebody is saying that this is the only way to do something, that's just BS. There isn't only one way to do something. I just commented on a Reddit post the other day about somebody, talking about how hard the heat was. And a common way to manage the heat is that I think most people would intuitively think, well, I'm going to get up early and I'm just going to go earlier before the sun comes out. Right. I don't always jump to morning is always better.
Yeah.
Right. You could absolutely have an afternoon, it might be 10 degrees hotter, but it's 20% less humidity in the afternoon. I might take that trade. Yeah. The point is that there is no single absolute way of how something can or should be done. And I think that adhering strictly to those things in my book is a major red flag. There is no magic cadence. There just isn't.
Yep.
Right. I think where that is born out of, as I think you reminded me last night, was an observation that Jack Daniels had for a certain type of athlete at the meet, right? That was not a study.
Yeah, no, that was just correlation. All of these good middle distance guys seem to be running 180, but they were elite middle distance guys.
Yeah. Didn't you actually look for, maybe it was something else. I thought that you told me you looked for...
That was 10% rule.
Oh, the 10% rule.
Yeah,
okay.
The 10% mileage rule is based on nothing. I can find no science that has tested this. It's probably like 8 glasses of water a day. Like, it's probably not a bad rule of thumb,
right. Or a conservative one at a minimum.
But I mean, as you and I know, like, especially in the world of ultra, people will go out and do a big weekend, all easy, and
that's fine.
That's fine. My next one, I think, is overcorrecting. I think when coaches, and I think often it's born out of maybe inexperience, when you have a coach that when you say, maybe you have a week where you're tired and you've been working long hours at your job and you had a deadline, and you, on a couple of workouts in your comments, say you were tired. To me, the right response is for the coach to talk to you about it. Talk about, is this sleep related? Is this that you're, these workouts were too hard? What's going on? Like, that should be the first conversation.
Yeah.
I have seen and have been coached in ways where that's sort of an immediate, like, okay, we're just going to go all easy next week.
Yeah.
Or you say, my calf is tight, and it's like, okay, 3 days rest, or a week.
There's a lot of stuff that you can train through.
There's a lot of stuff that you can train through. And I'm not advocating running through injury, but
Correct.
I think the problem with that is, for motivated athletes, it leads to underreporting those things. Because your coach is going to bench you or pull out all your workouts that week or cut your mileage. Sure. And maybe some of that is the right move. But if you're not telling somebody that you have something, you have a pain and it's getting worse, and you're afraid to say that early on, you're not going to have that collaboration and the chance to train around it and through it.
Yeah. I meant to actually put this in the being honest part of, if you're not being honest about the pain that you're feeling, then that runs the risk of, it's like the flip side of what you were just saying, of it runs the risk then of the underreporting aspect of potential injury.
Yeah. And I think if you have a coach that you know is going to kind of freak out at those things,
right,
or not know how to work with an athlete, like, again, if they can't program cross training, or, you know, they're not going to tell you, like, go to a PT and I'm going to, if you're willing, let me talk to the PT too, so that we can together work out what makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That is far more useful than just trying to grit your teeth and get through it on your own because you're afraid to say something.
Yeah.
And I think on the other side of that, we've also seen and like inherited some athletes where a coach, maybe they had a great race and then the coach overcorrected the wrong way and made their paces way too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up, you know, injured or overtrained. And I think it can go both ways. And usually, you know, athletes sort of welcome it when their paces get tweaked up, but that has to be done in a thoughtful way and not probably in the middle of a training cycle during high mileage.
Right. Yeah. The next one for me would be somebody who, we talked about this before, but somebody whose sole qualification, or at least primary qualification, is just how fast they were. I get frustrated with, because I am fast, I am therefore knowledgeable. And I think too often we equate fast with being good.
Yeah. There's a great Canova quote that I always come back to, which was something to the effect of, to be a great jockey, one does not first have to have been a horse.
Yeah.
But you do have to understand horses.
Yeah. Last couple here is, I think if the coach takes credit for the success of their athletes, but places the blame on them when things don't go well, I've seen it. We've seen coaches where they are a little bit more centered in what it is that they're doing and not appropriately placing the athlete at the center of what it is that's happening. And which is unfortunate, because it means that like the emphasis and the focus is not actually probably where it should be. So I think if there's a lot of like, I got this person through this, or I helped this person get to a 4-hour marathon, as opposed to we worked together on this and that helped them unlock this new gear. Like, I think listen to the language that they're using and how they're describing, whether it's something that like they are saying is that they are the reason, or that they have this magic sauce. No, they don't.
Yeah. And I think the other side of that is also, are they making excuses when things don't go
Right.
well? Because the problem there is then you're not really having an honest conversation about what needs to change potentially.
Yeah.
And if you're constantly going to just say like, oh, it was a hot day.
Yeah.
And maybe it was a hot day, but I think a good coach should be able to sort of look beyond the obvious initial reasons and kind of get to, if they're not adapting your training plan from one race to the next, they're really not doing their job.
Yeah.
And just because a plan worked for you once doesn't mean that it's going to work again. So again, I think also that's the other expectation sometimes athletes bring to it, is like, that marathon cycle went well, why aren't we doing exactly the same thing?
Yeah. I think this really ties nicely into our final section, which is, when might it be appropriate to leave a coach or take a break? A little bit of this is repeat, but if you've asked questions and voiced concerns and nothing has changed, if they take credit for your successes and make excuses for when things don't go well, they're not willing to problem solve. They demonstrate that they're not paying attention. So like they kind of like forget when you're racing. They're not really giving you like a modicum of support for what it is that your goals are, that their workouts are inappropriate. I don't mean like that there's an occasional mistake.
I mean, I think
this is technology.
Things happen. People.
Right. And it's not that like, people are also going through their own stuff, but it's just, are they doing these things regularly where they're not like demonstrated paying attention to you?
Yeah. I think like one that has happened to me is sort of a long struggle with a hamstring injury, and clearly articulating, these are the types of workouts that I know aggravate this. And I don't, one of them was like really short, fast, like 200 repeats. And I was training for an ultra. So there was really no reason that I needed to be doing that. Mm-hmm. And seeing them continually pop up in my plan, mm-hmm. and sort of constantly having to say like,
These don't work.
Yeah. So I think, again, like we all forget stuff, but things like that where it's a recurring problem and it really is just demonstrating like a lack of focus.
Right. Or that like they're just kind of focused on, well, this is what's worked for all of my other athletes. And so I'm just going to assume that it's going to work for you. There's two that I want to talk about that are not necessarily or inherently negative. One is, I think, a more challenging aspect to consider. And that is you're seeing an injury pattern either for yourself or with others. And as coaches, it's always heartbreaking when an athlete gets injured. And there's always that part of you that's like, what is it that I could have done? I don't think that also means that it is inherently the coach's fault. There are a wide range of factors that go into how and when somebody gets injured, including whether you are adequately recovering. And I can give you a plan and I can tell you to recover, but I can't sort of force you to make sure that you're getting enough sleep, or that you're regularly under fueling, that you are regularly running fasted. And I can remind you those things, but I can't run next to you and like give you an IV and force food down your throat. So that's not saying it's inherently your fault, but this is why this element is a more challenging element to talk about with some nuance, which is if you're seeing an injury pattern, you feel in your heart that you set yourself up to succeed. So you feel like you've genuinely followed the plan and you're still having this persistent injury and changes have not been made at all to address that. Yeah. We have gone through a ton, and I'm going to have to edit this down a lot because we're already at quite a bit of time recording. Yes. That said, is there anything on your written list? This is the first time that we've done printed notes. Is there anything that you think we've missed?
I think the last thing on my list is it's like PT or going to therapy. Like you're going to get out of it what you put into it. So just going to PT when you're injured, but then not actually doing the exercises at home is not going to fix your injury.
Yeah.
And in the same way, just getting a coach and not really engaging in that process.
Yeah. I can give you a training plan. That does not mean you're going to like training. That's basically what we're saying.
We're going to have to put that link in the show notes.
Yeah. I can give you 400s. Doesn't mean you're going to become a miler. Okay. Well, I hope this has been useful for the listeners. If you want to talk with us directly, and even if you don't think that we are the right coach for you, but you just want to delve into a little bit more of any of what we've talked about, we would love to have questions, feedback on the episode. Like and subscribe to Legwork and share all the conversations that we're having. Molly, as always, this has been a lovely episode. And I look forward. This is episode 5.
Wow.
So we're well on our way. Most podcasts don't get to 5 episodes.
It's like a small business surviving 5 years.
A little bit. I think that if there's any magic number I've heard on podcasting, it's like 20. The second, a significant, it's like some crazy percent of podcasts have fewer than 20 episodes. And it becomes like this like tale of like a ton have like 1 to 5. A good chunk have between 5 and 15, 5 to 20. But then like once you get to 20, it's like, so I consistently see that number come up. I'm sure it is not a magic number, but this is a medium that I think we enjoy having these nuanced conversations. We hope you've enjoyed it too.